Hi, everyone. What's up there? Can you hear me? Great. Great. Every time I try to make a webinar, it's always hit and miss because I'm not that used to this kind of stuff, but hopefully I get used since we are going to do a lot of them in the future. So how are you? Let's wait for a little bit more people, some minutes, and then we'll dig into this plugin. I'm going to share my screen and explain you how the plugin works, and try to mix the same song we were mixing in the last webinar because it was working fine as a demonstration. And last time I did Total EQ with Multicomp Plus, but I just explained Total EQ. Now I'm going to skip Total EQ and explain how I'm going to use Multicomp Plus MK2 to compress and fine-tune the sound of every track. So I don't know if we have to wait a little more to see if some more people comes in. I'm going to apologize for my voice today because I'm a little bit ill. So you are going to hear me not that very well, but hopefully I'll be able to explain myself and you be able to understand what I say. So if you don't understand anything, something I say, please tell me, because English is not my primary language, and I may get something wrong. So be kind. So we are 24 right now. Wait a little bit more, just 1 minute, then we're going to start. Thank you for my English, but the issue here is that I'm a little bit ill, so my nose is completely full and I can't really breathe. So hopefully I'll be able to talk. The plugin only react to the left channel. What do you mean exactly? If you put all our plugins work both in mono and stereo. So if you put the plugin on a mono track, maybe you will see action only on the left channel because the right channel is actually mute and not used by the DAW. I don't know, it depends on the DAW, on how the DAW use the mono and stereo tracks. Anyway, Carlos, if you have this kind of issue, you probably should use one of our support channel. And now from today, we also have a support forum on KVR audio. So if you want to ask a public question, you're going to answer there. But the best thing you can do is to open a support ticket on our website, and Mazo, our support guy, will try to assist you and help you if you have issues. It really depends on the DAW. So we need to know the DAW you're using, sample rate, buffer size, this kind of technical stuff to understand what's going on. So I think we can start. We are 27 now. So it's probably time to start. Okay, so let's start. Well, I'm going to explain that. Yes, MK2 has the BX160 modeled, so it's one of the models. But I'm going to tell you in a minute. Just let me share the screen. So here we are in Reaper, where I usually make all these kind of demonstrations, and I can you still hear me? Yes, great. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is trying to play the track. Let me know if you hear it, because the first time didn't went that well. So let me know if you hear the track. No, you don't, because I haven't shared the computer sound. That's my fault. So let me share it. Share computer sound, and maybe now it works. Okay, it should work. Let me know if it works. Great, 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 great. So let's first start showing you how Multicomp Plus MK2 looks and works. So this is the interface of the plugin, and it's actually very simple. You may have been used to this kind of interface now. It was novel some years ago, but now it's pretty standard. You have the main area here that is occupied by the waveform and the compression that is visually shown. So if I press play now, you can see the input waveform, the amount of compression, where the threshold is, it's the red line. And that's also on the right, the gain reduction meter. So you have all the visual aids that may help you to fine-tune your compressor. And this is pretty standard. Then we have our general controls up here. We have the oversampling, and if you set to none by default, it doesn't do any oversampling. And 2 times, 4 times is pretty self-explanatory. When you press auto, okay, oversampling is let's say a way to increase the resolution of a plugin, of a DSP algorithm, by feeding it with more samples than you actually have, and simulating the fact that you recorded at a higher sample rate. This is useful because when you process with some kind of non-linear processing a piece of audio that has been sampled, you are actually generating a kind of distortion that is called aliasing and is not wanted. With oversampling, you reduce the amount of aliasing because you are simulating like that you recorded in the first place at a higher sample rate. This is usually very desirable on this kind of effects because a compressor is actually a modulator, because you are modulating the signal of a sidechain, of the side chain that may be external or internal, with the input signal. And this kind of modulation creates intersample distortion, intermodulation distortion, that in digital, that in the digital world translates to more aliasing. So you don't want that, and you want to keep the oversample as high as possible for this kind of applications. But of course, since you are actually, if you select 4 times, you actually do the work 4 times more than with the oversampling set to none. You want to balance the CPU usage with the oversampling. For this reason, the plugin starts at none, because aliasing, yes, is a problem, but is a problem when you compress a lot. So you don't usually don't go that hard with compressors unless you want some effect, unless you are working with a vocal or something that really needs to be compressed. Auto always guarantee the best performance for the model chosen, because not every compressor model that we have here generate the same amount of aliasing. So when you choose auto, you are actually asking the plugin to decide the amount of oversampling depending on the model you have chosen. And right now, I can say that it's 2 times for VCA, it's 4 times for FAT, 2 times for Opto. It seems, maybe if I remember well, it's 2 times for Expander, and 4 times for Console 4K and VCA 160. And it's chosen automatically. So, and it also changes depending on the sample rate of the project. So the higher the sample rate you set to your project, since you are already feeding the plugin with a lot of samples, we are not going to oversample more. So we want to always have the needed bandwidth for the model. So if you have the project at 96 kilohertz at sample rate, you probably want, if you select auto and select VCA, you probably won't get any oversampling, because it's actually the 2 times oversample at 44K. So I don't know if I explained myself, but what matters here is that the plugin internally has the amount of bandwidth needed for the correct processing. So if you set the oversampling to auto, it's going to set itself to the right bandwidth. So then we have the analog saturation option here that you can disable, of course. So you have a clean digital processor, or 100% means that it's the actual saturation of the hardware unit. Every model here is modeled after a specific hardware circuit, not a specific hardware unit, because it's not an emulation of a specific 1176 or LA2A. It's just an emulation of the circuit. And if you choose 100%, you are going to get the amount of saturation of the circuit. And if you select 200%, you are going to get an exaggerated amount. So you want more distortion. It's actually double the saturation applied by the circuit. So it's just a matter of taste. I usually set it 100%. I don't think about it. The transformer button, of course, emulates an input and output transformer. And since most of the units are vintage ones, transformer is part of the sound. It should be on with the FAT and Opto, and also the other models benefit from the transformer. It actually creates a little bit more of saturation at the low end and the high end, and it does a minimum frequency shaping, so it changes subtly the sound, and the more you push it, the more you get a different sound if transformer is enabled. It really reacts with the sound, so it works well with kick drums and snare drums that have a very high transient, and this creates a more smooth transient, both with analog saturation and transformer enabled, and also create more harmonics in the low end. So it's something that you may want if you are after the classical rock sound. The hiss button is the simulation of the background hiss of the hardware device. Every analog device makes some hiss, and we decided to put this button because usually people want that hiss in their emulations. But if you are going to use a lot of instances of this plugin or any other plugin that makes hiss, you probably want to turn it off, because remember, back in the analog days, you may have access to 3 or 4 of that compressors, or if you were lucky, you had 10 compressors, and then you have to use the console, and the hiss sums up. So if you're going to use 20 instances of this compressor, 24, 30, 50 instances, you're going to get a massive amount of hiss. So you want to turn it off for transformer. Transformer and hiss are not variable, either on or off. Honestly, I don't know how could make a transformer variable, because it's just a piece of hardware that you strap in and you get the response out of that. The hiss may be variable. We have some plugins that have a variable hiss, but in this plugin, hiss is linked to the model. So there are models that make more hiss and models that make less hiss. So you either have it on or off. We can think about making it variable in a future release, probably, I don't know, but it's not scheduled for this year, so it's something that is going to come in the far future. Then on the right, you have the input and output knobs. Of course, they are used to give the right amount of signal into the plugin. Yes, the hiss is always present, like you were using a hardware unit. So if you had a hardware compressor, you had to deal with this, and it's actually quite low. It's at negative 80 dBs. So it's not that high, but it's not that low. It's not, of course, what you are used to in the digital world of total clean sound. But it's not either something you can't manage. It's in the ballpark. It's the average of what most hardware units does. They usually have background noise at around negative 90, and if you are very good, if you're talking about analog digital compressor, they stay at around negative 100, 150. So 115, sorry. So they are very clean, but vintage hardware units are not. So if you want a modern sound, turn hiss off, and maybe turn saturation and transformer off. With these options, turn off, you're going to get only digital models. So there is no analog emulation anywhere, just the compressor behavior, but without their non-linearities. Sorry, give me one moment. I'm sorry. This is going to happen sometimes tonight because I have this problem. But I love, especially for this track, that it's a punky rock track, I love to have my analog saturation, transformer, and hiss. Because these are not a lot of tracks, and I'm going to have the real feel here. So allergia, exactly. I don't know how to say that in English. Next to the input and output knobs, you have the auto toggles. When you turn these on, input and output are automatically adjusted according to the signal to keep everything at 0 VU. 0 VU, it's a golden rule of analog world, And for those who may not know that, VU are different than peak meter, the peak values, because VU are measure average sound. So an average, this is a sound, a measure that helps you get the right loudness, not the peak, not the maximum peak. So keep that in mind. When you enable auto, you are going to get the knob automatically set so that the input signal is at 0 VU, and it's perfect because it's the level that the analog engine of this thing expects, and it's calibrated exactly at -18. So when you, to put it simple, when you pass a sine wave at 1 kilohertz, which is peaking at -18, you are going to get 0 VU internally of this model. So it's an average at -18. So if I, for example, press auto on the input here and then press play, you see the knob automatically set to the right input level so that the internal reference is at 0 VU. And when I press stop, auto automatically disengage, because if I was to save my song and close it and then open it again with the auto enabled, every knob would start recalculating everything from the beginning, and it may cause, of course, gains to go nuts and ruin your mix. So when you press stop, this automatically turns off to avoid issues. And of course, this happens also when you save your project. So when you save your project, these are not saved with the project and they stay off. Also on the, after the input and output knob, you get the sidechain controls. Sidechain is what drives the compressor. Usually it's internal. So does everybody knows how a compressor works internally? Okay, a compressor, it's a gain control device, and it works using splitting the input signal. You get the signal that entered the processor, then it got split. When it splits, the first and main signal goes through a gain adjusting element that may be an FAT for the 1176, an opto resistor for the LA style compressor, or a VCA for the DBX style compression. VCA is an electronic device that changes its gain according to a certain voltage on the control pin. So you got the first signal is it's like having a little man inside the compressor with a fader that lowers the gain of the signal when something happens. And this something can be divided in two options. The first is the standard, it's the internal sidechain. That means the original signal, the same that is going to be adjusted. It gets split and passes through the attack and release stages, so it gets smoothed. It gets smoothed by the attack and release control. So you get a smooth wave, not peaks and valleys like the original sound. And this smooth wave is then used to drive the gain changing element. In the case of the VCA, in the case of the just a moment. In the case of the VCA, it drives the voltage on the control pin, while in the case of the opto, it lights up the opto element that in turn change the resistance in the opto resistor. And in the FAT, it changes the working point of the FAT, changing the internal resistance of the element. So it's something that drives the gain changing element. And of course, if you bypass the split of the signal and take the signal from an external source, you get an external sidechain. And it can be, of course, anything you connect to the sidechain port of the hardware compressor. In software, we get in software you get different input ports in the plugin, and you can route some audio to that. Larry, yeah, levels of the dynamic range, but not brings up the lows. It just brings down the highs when the signal crosses the threshold. When it crosses the threshold, it gets passed through the attack and release stuff, and then goes to the gain changing elements. So it doesn't brings up the low. This is called an upward compressor, and it's not included in the Multicomp Plus, and it's a different beast, because when the signal crosses below the threshold, it gets increased in volume, not decreased like in the downward compression that it's the standard compressor that everybody has. Randy, let me read your question. Well, the external sidechain is you can feed the compressor with the signal you want. What drives the compression is the threshold. So if you want to or lower the threshold or increase the level of the external sidechain, you get the same effect. So it's up to you. It's up to you if you prefer to use a fader to drive a send to the compressor, or you just leave the fader of the send at 0 and use the threshold of the compressor. It's actually the same thing. It doesn't really matter the level of the sidechain, unless it's so low that you can go lower than negative 60 dB of the threshold. So if it's lower than negative 60 dBs, you're not going to get any compression, of course. Yes, Larry, some compressor have both upward and downward compression. We have one in catalog, and it's called Dynamics Control, and we have both upward and downward compressor on the same plugin. Sidechain in Reaper, we are going to do that to sidechain the kick with the bass. So I will show you. No, Randy. The detector doesn't actually distort. The only saturation happens on the main channel here. This is not a correct 100% analog emulation, I know, but it's for to make it more usable. Otherwise, you should have thought about distortion in the sidechain, and it's another word altogether. As a nice note, you probably know that there are different versions of 1176. The one here is the black circuit, because if you take the blue circuit, the blue one, it's a little bit different, and in fact, it has a little bit more aggressive sound in the mid-highs, exactly because the sidechain gets into distortion easily, the internal sidechain. So that distortion causes more intermodulation distortion in the end, and it gives a little bit more aggressive sound. It's an algorithm we tried, and it's only available in the FAT with computer music. We never used that algorithm again because it caused more aliasing than I wanted. So that's the reason why I haven't used it anymore. What more? With the sidechain, both internal and external, you can set an high pass and low pass filter. They both are 6 dB octave, so it's pretty gentle, and they are useful if you, for example, are using the plugin on the master bus and don't want to react that much to kick and bass, so you can increase the high pass, and you are not going to get, you're going to filter the sidechain, and it's not going to react to the actual kick and bass. The same goes for the low pass. Honestly, I never use that, but it's nice to have it for sound design. If you want to only compress the kick, you just you only wanted your bass compressor to react only on the kick, you just close it, so you only let it pass the low frequencies, and it's going to evenly react on bass and kick. So then you have the standard controls here: the threshold, ratio, attack, and release. For those who don't know how the compressor works, attack and release actually allows you to decide how fast the compression should happen. So if you have a fast attack, as soon as the sound increases level, the smooth wave I was talking before increases in level, so it's faster, and you may have compression happening soon. And with a fast release, when the level goes down, the same smooth wave goes down, while a slow release keeps that wave that controls the gain changing element at higher level, even if the input level lowered, so the compression takes time to recover, and it actually moves more smoothly. These are settings that goes with the kind of signal that you are using, and to get also changes depending on the model. And if I was to use the same setting with different kind of models, they would react differently, because it's something that works together with the music and the kind of compression that it's happening. So you really have to tweak these knobs and find a sweet spot that works for you. There is no really a general rule, unless you are after some kind of effect, of course. The ratio control lets you choose the amount of distortion that is applied, the amount of compression that is applied to the signal when it crosses the threshold. So until the signal is below the threshold, nothing happens, or almost nothing happens, because we have two vintage models here that really don't respect the setting, because they have a very smooth curve, and so it's not like below the threshold nothing happens, above the threshold compression. It's more like a few compression happens if the signal is over here, a lot of compression happens if the signal is over here, but it's not an hard transition, it's a very smooth one. And you will see what I mean when I start compressing. And this ratio choose the amount of compression that happens. So if the compression is let's say if it were a perfect digital model, if the compression is, if the signal is 10 dB above threshold, and you have 2 to 1 ratio, you are going to get a compression of 10 dBs. This is not what is happening, because these are analog models, but it gives you a rough indication of how much you are compressing. So if you want to limit everything, just put it to 20 to 1, and it's going to limit everything very hard. Yes, it's VCA, FET, and Opto are the same models, and Expander, same models of the channel strip. Console 4K and VCA 160 are available only on this plugin. Also, what more? We have an auto button here that lets you choose the amount of gain reduction you want. Say -6. I I've put that as a default because it's a pretty standard level that everyone aims to when compressing, because it's usually the right amount of compression. So if you press auto and choose the ratio you want, say for 1, the threshold will auto adjust to compress negative 60 dB. Let's see it in action. And here you go. We got 6 dB of compression. And of course, when you press stop, it turns off by itself to avoid messing with your tracks when you open the project that you previously saved. It's the same thing with the other buttons. All these tools, all these auto tools are meant to help you get results faster. Instead of tweaking the threshold knob, you just press auto. You have in mind how much you want to compress usually. So with a little bit more of experience, you know that which your targets are. So you set the target, press auto, let it do its thing, and pass to the next track. Then you have the bypass button, of course, and it bypasses completely the processing. Dry wet, that is useful. Yes, of course. And dry wet is useful for parallel compression. If you want to parallel compress a drum bus, for example, this is something that is often done. No need to complex routing or buses or anything like that. Just use a dry wet knob and say I want to be more dry and less wet, or the opposite. And with this knob, you get your parallel compression done. You ask Larry about the relation between the gold and gray waveforms. Well, here they come. The gray waveform is the input signal, and the gold waveform is the gain reduction applied at every moment. So you see, if I change the attack and release, you will see that the gold waveform changes. If I shorten the release, so you see, this is actually the compression, and of course it's affected by attack and release. Also, around the threshold knob, you have input level that helps you to set correctly threshold to get the right compression if you want to do it manually. And what more? We only have the models left to explain. And these models are based around a given kind of circuit. So VCA, it's not actually any hardware unit. It's modeled after the standard VCA circuit that you find in most of contemporary compressors. So it's a very, let's say, very precise compression. It has an RMS detector, so it's not working on peaks, but on the average level. And it has, when you select it, you have the classical operational amplifier distortion in the saturation model. So you get only first, third, fifth, seventh, and so on harmonics. And this is a more hard sound but it's perfect for modern instruments like they say keyboards, or if you have synthesizers. It's nice on piano. It's a more general kind of compression. FAT is of course based around the 1176 circuit, and it's very fast. You see the attack and release times change to very fast times. It's meant to be used very hard because it has a sound, and the sound is because since it's very fast, it creates a lot of intermodulation distortion, and it gets aggressive very easily. And it's also the only feedback compressor in here. It's particular because I was telling you before that when a signal enters the compressor, it's split in two paths. One goes to the sidechain and the other to the main audio path. And with the FAT model, it happens the opposite. The signal is split after the gain changing element, right before the output. So this compressing signal affects the level of the sidechain, and it goes following itself. It's a very particular kind of compression, and it's very fun to use. I love it usually on kicks, snare. When you don't have much body, but you have a big slap, usually the FAT helps you to get more average level, and this in turn helps you to get more loudness in your final mix, and let the tracks be perceived better by the listener. But it also, of course, loses some of the snap, so you have to balance, of course, as with everything in mixing. Opto, it doesn't have any kind of control because it's based around the LA two-way circuit. It creates the tube distortion, so it has all the harmonics, both odd and even, and it's quite slow both in the attack and release, because it simulates what happens inside the optocell in the LA2A. This optocell works lighting up a luminescent panel that in turn changes the resistance of an opto resistor. An opto resistor is an electronic component that changes its internal resistance according to the amount of light that hits it. So the more light, the less resistance, and less light, the more resistance. So these, of course, you may understand that have some kind of hysteresis. So when the first panel, the panel is lights first, you have the attack time of the panel because the lights doesn't turn on immediately, but it takes a little bit of while. Then you also have the attack time of the resistor, because when the light is on, the resistor changes its resistance, but not immediately. So you have a little bit of curve over there too. Then when the light turns off, it doesn't turn off immediately, of course, and you have a slow decay of the light, and the same happens for the resistance. So it's a smooth compressor. It's not able to catch the peaks in the signal, but it's able to give you a good sustained sound if you don't have issue with peaks. Usually it's used on constant sounds. It works well with vocals if they are not too much screamed. If the singer screams too much or have problems with P's with the pulses in the microphone, the opto compressor is going to suffer from that. But you can use both the 1176 and opto, the FAT and opto together to take care of that. We'll see that later. And it works well on guitars, it works well on synthesizer like pads and strings, and everything that has a quite constant sound. The expander works in the other way. So it gates everything, and it just opens up when the signal crosses the threshold. It's not really, it's like the VCA, so it's a general model. And it's useful if you have spills, if you recorded your drums and have spills in the snare and a kick, and you want to only have the kick and the snare play when the actual sound is there, not when the overhead the drummer played the spills into the microphone. You just set your expander. It's like a gate, but more gentle, and you only let the real sound pass through. So nothing more to say about that. The console 4K emulates the console compressor of the SSL 4K. It's a VCA based. It's an RMS, but with a very short window. If my memory helps me, it's 83 milliseconds. So it takes the average level, but not that average. It means that it only looks at the previous 83 milliseconds, and it does it in an analog way. So it's not a perfect RMS calculation, but it's a general idea of loudness that is used to drive attack and release and ratio controls and everything. And it also has not a hard knee, it has quite smooth knee, so it sounds gentle and dry at the same time. You have to listen to understand, and I'll let you do that. We put the attack time from 3 milliseconds to 33 milliseconds. The original hardware unit only has a switch that goes for or through 3 milliseconds or 33. We decided to put a knob to make it more useful. And the release time is the same of the hardware unit, from 100 milliseconds to 4 seconds. The VCA 160 is an emulation of the DBX 160. And it doesn't have attack and release time because they are fixed. It's a very peculiar compressor, since all the compressors, all the models we have here have exponential attack and release. This is because in the analog world, these controls are made using a resistor and condenser combo, and this gives this kind of attack and release. This is called exponential because this is the physical law that drives the charge and discharge of the capacitor. With this unit, the DBX decided to make linear attack and release. So it sounds different. And if I press play, you will see that the compressor here doesn't do this, but this. Let me show you. You see, these lines here are linear, not exponential, because this compressor has this kind of release, and it makes the compressor much more dry. And it's very suited if you have a bass player that is playing a lot of notes, like with a funky bass player, an R&B bass player. This is going to sound very good on your Fender Jazz, and it's pretty much a standard compressor on bass for this reason, because it makes bass sound much more dry and compact, so you can easily mix it with a kick without getting it lost in the mix. Well, Tony, VCA 160 is pretty much used only on bass on my side. People also use it with pianos, use it with guitars. You have to, acoustic guitars, I meant, sorry. You have to decide if the kind of sound you want. So VCA and console are both dry compressors. So something that you want to keep dry. You don't want big tails. You don't want a big sound. but also you don't want to use that often on drums unless you are after a very peculiar sound, because they are not going to catch the short peaks of the drums, and you're going to use your bass compressor much more. But keep in mind that console 4K is pretty standard because it's found on the SSL 4K, so the sound is found in a lot of records. And Andy Wallace, for example, is famous for mixing only with a console compressor and using the minimum necessary of outboard compressor. So his drums are mainly made using this model here and the bass compressor for the SSL. It's the 4K, the E model, the one with the brown knobs. But keep in mind that the compressor doesn't change much from different 4K. It's the equalizer that changes a lot. Now, I have explained you with words the differences between these compressors. Now, I usually, it's my preferences, you do whatever you prefer. I usually put an opto compressor on the master bus as first thing, and then start. No, this plugin doesn't have any mid side. No. Is mid side is more for those who need to fix stuff. This is visual analog emulations. It's meant to be your general compressor. Yeah, Larry, when you enable the external, the sidechain is not taken by the input signal. It's not we are not using the split input signal, but we are using the you see that we have 4 inputs here. We are using these two inputs instead of the main left and right. David, oh, let me read your question. Well, parallel processing usually brings up everything. So if you have distortion or noise, you are not going to fix that. This is not a plugin meant to be used to fix something. You need more surgical processing to fix stuff. This is to give color and make your general mixing duties. So it's like having a console and external outboard. So you're not going to fix problems with this plugin. For the problems of plosives, I would use the FAT model. It is the one with the faster attack and release, and I will keep everything very fast. So you're going to catch everything. It's the same. When you have a hum with a compressor, you are going to amplify the hum because you are increasing the overall level, reducing the dynamic range. So for the hum, you need something more intelligent. You could, since it's hum, it's probably at 50 or 60 hertz. So you could simply use an high-pass filter, a very step high-pass filter like you have here on Total EQ. You can add 48 dB high-pass filter at, say, 100 hertz, and you're going to cut everything. So you're not going to have the hum anymore. Of course, you are losing some of the bass, hyper bass frequencies, but if you have it on a microphone in a vocal, this is not an issue. If you have it on a kick, it's a problem. Thank you, Tony. That's cool. That's cool. Well, to get the sidechain, I can do that quite easily. For example, if I want to sidechain the kick to the bass, first I set my Multicomp Plus on the bass channel. Then I select the external sidechain and set up a send here in Reaper. Every node makes this in a different way. So what we are seeing here, it's the Reaper way of doing it. You should refer to your DAW specific instruction. So I make a send from the, to the bass track here. And I say, go from audio 1, 2 of this track to audio 3 and 4 or the other track. 3 and 4 are available because I've put here a plugin that has 4 inputs. So since we have 4 inputs, the 3 and 4 inputs are for the external sidechain. And if I now press play, the compressor, the bass, reacts on the kick. So if I, for example, use the send, compressor doesn't react anymore. So when you enable, it sends the sidechain of the compressor and compresses the bass sound using that signal. So we are making room for the bass and the kick together to when they play together, compressing the bass when a kick hits. Yes, that's a little bit different because you are not compressing the low frequencies, but you are making the compressor react only on low frequencies. So that means that every frequency is going to be compressed. It's wideband. But since you have chosen to not listen to the high frequencies, only when the amount of lows is enough, the wideband compression happens. I don't know if this is clear. If you want to compress only low frequencies, only mid frequencies, high frequencies, you need to use a multiband compressor. And that splits the signal before the compressors. Or even better, in my opinion, I don't use multiband compressor a lot. Even better, use a dynamic EQ. You can use a very wide Q on a specific band and compress only, reduce the gain that it's compressing only on that band. So it's much more natural, in my opinion, than the multiband compressor that have that crossover before them that creates phase distortion if it's not made with linear phase filters, and creates pre-ringing and adds latency if it's made with linear phase filters. So it's always something that I really don't like that much, but everybody has its own taste. So if you like multiband compression, no problem using it. Yeah, exactly, Tony. Usually compression, let's make a little bit of a history here. Compression was born because in the beginning, you had to record to vinyl record in one pass. You had the piano playing, you had the trumpets playing, you had everything, the band together playing, and you had to fit everything in a very limited limited space, talking about dynamics, because the vinyl doesn't have that much headroom. So to avoid creating issue with sorry, I don't know the word in English, with the needle skipping the grooves, you had to keep the level flat. You can't afford to have big transients and big basses. because otherwise the needle would skip the groove. So engineers invented compression to keep everything in a certain dynamic range and avoid this problem. So it's more of a avoid problem tool, and we keep using that because we are very used to this kind of sound, and we love that because as humans, because it increases the perceived loudness and makes everything, especially the voice, makes everything more clear. Yeah, exactly. Vocals are doesn't really sound good without compression. We are so used to having the signal compressed, because it's what actually our ear does. When I talk to you and you are next to me, my ear is actually compressing the signal to make everything clear to me and make me understand what you say. When you record that, this doesn't happen. Don't ask me why, because I don't know that. But this actually doesn't happen unless you turn your volume very high when listening. So with compression, we fix that. Yes, Randy, that's what, for those who does not speak Italian, Randy is asking if he wanted to compress, to make parallel compression using only mid frequencies like Pretolesi does. You need, of course, to filter the low, and the high, and only get the frequency range you want your detector to react. In this way, you are only listening to frequencies between 800 and 450 for 500 hertz, so 4500 hertz. So you are ignoring low frequencies and high frequencies and only reacting to mid frequencies. With this knob, you can do the parallel compression you want. Just give me one moment, sorry. Then, what to say more? What to say more? Let's start to work with the track and see what we can do with a compressor. Okay, now I'm going to remove. I haven't got that right. We are going to remove this compressor here because we want to start with a kick, and we are going to use it anyway, so leave the send here. We're going to start with a kick and with a bass compressor. So first set the bass compressor.
Dall'America parte come Corrado e i fascisti su Marte. Vado nel mondo da salvatori mischiando le carte. Colonizzatori sempre più buoni padroni, ma con la faccia ci mettono, avanzano con i droni. E chi conquistatori col fare da cafoni, carri armati mettono onde che poi tu suoni. Questa è la questione delle questioni, non sono supposizioni ma pallottole che fischiano in tutte le direzioni, come quando premi un muori.
Okay, I usually want my bass compressor to stay around -3. It's gentle, just to give me a little bit more warmth and loudness. Yeah, that's thank you, Marco. That's my band. We don't do anything except rehearsal, but we have fun. Pad or field recording. So what do you mean with field recording? Something that has been recorded live outside. We have the room track. Maybe it works for your example. we have the room track over here. Maybe we can use that for the field recording. I don't know. Let me understand why we have feedback in the voice. We have because we have, of course, sends over here. So let me mute them. I don't want them. Okay, we should be clean now. No, I don't know. We are still listening to the vocals for some reason. Well, let's pretend it works. Everything works fine and go on. So now, I will. Okay, let's start with a room compression. Let's take our compressor and listen to that. I usually love to squash my room in the drums bass, because this gives me the body of the drums and gives me a more complete sound. So what I'm going to do is to set this to auto as FET, and not being shy, I would say 20:1 ratio, very fast attack, a little bit slower release, and see what happens. Maybe even faster. No, we are still listening to something that shouldn't be there, and this is an issue for this demo. I don't understand why, honestly. Let me check this thing. Okay, let me just mute everything. Except for the room track, see what happens. So I have to unmute the bass, the music bass. Okay, now I have it. Now it's only the room track. You see, I'm really compressing it very hard, because this gives my drums the needed body. Now, of course, I lost a lot of gain, so I'll bring it up. I can use the auto button if I want. So this brings up the level. So you see, can you hear how the FET compressor works? It's really aggressive, and it creates a very organic sound. I don't know if I explain myself. Just give a little bit more attack. Especially on the snare, you are losing completely the attack part, and you are getting the body of the snare up there. And we are going to use this to complement the complete drum sound. Then I can unsolo our overheads. I usually don't work this way, but I want to try to do this for this time. So unsolo the overheads, and make their sound first together with the room track. But we are not getting anything because the overhead tracks are mute. Okay, here we are. I don't want to compress the overhead too much, because if I compress them too much, I will bring up a lot of rumble, a lot of noise, a lot of everything, and I want just the crashes and the ride and the overall drum sound. So I'm going to put -3 here and set this to auto with a gentle ratio. And we are going to use an opto compressor, because it's a smooth compressor and it doesn't kill our transient, and at the same time it keeps our body. So let's see if it works. So if I mute the room, you can hear the overheads. They are very clean and kept under control by this very small amount of compression. So we actually really just tamed the attack of the snare to let us have the cymbals pass through. So if I put it together to the room, well, no, there is no really a rule here. It's just a visual aid. There is no a general rule. You have to have an idea of sound in mind. And usually with drums, I like to have the room track to create the overall idea of the drums, like you were in the room exactly. And the overheads need to convey the sound of the cymbals when they hit, and you have to use them to spread wide the drum kit. So you want them wide, and you want to not compress them too much, otherwise you are going to remove the attack of the cymbals that gives one of the part of the impact of a drum sound. So there is no general rule. This is just a visual idea of the sound to let you see if you have some peaks, something that is looking just at this may be deceiving, because you may lose one peak that you want to tame. With this history here, even if it's short, you see what happened in the past, so you can more easily, you have more time, your brain has more time to change settings to fix stuff. So I think this is good. Now we are going to work on the kick and snare. Let's start with a kick. First, take Multicomp Plus, then unmute the track, oversample auto, leave everything on. I'm going to use FAT because I love the sound, but I'll let you hear the difference between FAT and Console 4K, for example. It depends on the sound of the kick and the sound I'm after. I can use independently both. You can also use VCA, but Console 4K is actually the same and sounds better for this context. No, it doesn't have presets, and you cannot save presets with a plugin. You have to rely on your DAW preset management because compression is really something that is specific to a given track. So you have to twist the knobs and to apply it. When you start to have some experience, you will know which knob to tweak and at which level set everything. For example, for this application, for the FAT, I will set the ratio to 8, and I will use an attack at around the halfway of the knob with the shortest release I can, because I want to create a boom from the kick. So let me set correctly input and output. So you see, if you know what you're doing, with 3 clicks, you get everything done automatically. And the kick sound is done, compression aware. So if I want to change my model, you see, just listen to this kick. It's very full and round. It's a larger than life kick. If I want something more controlled, I can use this other model here. I usually use a very fast attack anyway, because I want the kick to be under control, and the fastest release I can, because the kick is a very fast sound. So we cannot really afford to have the compressor still compressing when the next kick hits. So with the faster sound, with a faster release, you are safe from that, and you also get a little bit more aggressive sound. So if I press play, can you hear the difference? You remember the other sound was a little bit more fuller and a little bit larger. This is more controlled. It gets more snap. Yes, Robert, I'm recording that, and it will be available on YouTube. So you will have the chance to look at it later. So I was saying, this sound is more controlled, it's more dry, but for this song, I think the FAT works better. So I will set it again around here and with the right amount of compression. And here we are. So the kick is done. Now let's move on to the snare. We have 2 tracks for the snare, up and down, mic up and down, and I'm going to compress it the same way I did with the kick, because I want a very large sound. But I'll let you, let's start with the console 4K. So I'll let you hear the difference. 4:1 usually is good. Fast attack, because we have a short, fast transient, and we want to keep it in control to get the loudness we want out of the track. So auto input. Auto compression and auto output. And that's it. Can we hear the sound? Can you hear the sound of the snare? It's a very dry sound. It's controlled. It doesn't go anyway. It doesn't have very hard transients, a very hard slam at the beginning, because we kept it in control using the short attack time, and it's a good sounding snare. But I want to let you listen to the FAT, because it works very well on the rock snares, and just set everything auto like I did before. Can you hear that? It's completely different. Dylan, 160 is 160 VU. It's the older one. With the FAT compressor, you are going to have a more squashed snare. You are completely losing the attack and you are gaining the body of the snare. So, so it's completely different sound, and it depends on what you're after. Not everything benefits from this kind of compression. Rock music does. Not sure that some kind of electronic or more pop music works with this kind of compression, because it's very aggressive. So, and fills the stage. So when the snare is not that important, it's not doesn't have to be the center of the stage. Well, I don't think the FAT is going to work well. It really depends on the effect you are after and the music you are mixing. So for this reason, we have different models, different flavor. The auto output is calibrated to negative 18 dB. It's a VU meter, like I explained at the beginning. And so you get the loudness set to 0 VU, calibrated to negative 18 dBs. I can use the bypass, but bypasses completely the process. So you're going to get loudness, different loudness. I think the difference is very clear. We actually, what we did is just squash the beginning of the snare, where the hard transient is. If you look at the graphic here, it's pretty clear that we are just compressing a very short amount of time, very short spikes of compression, and we release that so fast that we can lift up the level of the body, just removing the transient at the beginning. I don't know if I explained clearly what this compression does. Okay, this is fine for me. I'm not a lover of a very hard compression unless it's for an effect. So I leave at -6 of gain reduction. And then I usually don't compress hi-hat. I leave that alone as it is. And we are not going to compress the tom and the floor tom, because in this song they never play, so it's useless. And now let's listen to the whole drum bass and add a compressor to the drums to make some parallel compression and get some body. Okay, this is our general drum sound, and now add our Multicomp Plus compressor here too. I want to make a very hard New York style parallel compression, so I will use the FAT and squash everything so I can use it as a parallel to get the body. So I will set it manually. Yeah, I route everything to the drum bass. I don't like to compress the hi-hat because usually in the hi-hat track, you're going to get a lot of spill from the snare, and it's only really used to position the hi-hat in the stereo field. Usually compressing the hi-hat doesn't do any good, except for bringing up the spill of the other drums that are close to that. So usually I don't compress it. So I like it when it's faster. I like it. It's faster settings because it creates that idea of squash drums I want. Now with the dry wet knob, I will do this parallel compression thing. This is the dry signal, so the parallel is not happening. The HPF and low pass filter are 60 dB octave, so are gentle filters because usually very hard filters doesn't work fine with that. If you need harder filters, you could do an external sidechain with a bus containing all the other tracks you want to sidechain and use an EQ on that sidechain, so you can do the equalization you want. These are provided here just for general shaping, to help you with bus compression or parallel compression. I don't use them that much, honestly, but I know people that likes to use them. So can you hear the difference with the parallel compression? When it's in bypass, when the plugin is in bypass, you are getting a drier sound, let's say, a more controlled sound. When we enable the plugin, we are adding a very squashed sound together with the dry one. So we are getting more body, more room, more ambience, a more fuller drums. Of course, this goes accordingly to the music you are mixing. Because if you have a very busy mix, probably you don't want drum to fill all that space. So you just have to decide if you want or not. In this track, we only have drums, bass, guitars, and vocals going on. So I need that parallel compression. Sorry, Philippe. Philippe? What do you mean? You don't hear the sound of Reaper on demos? So sorry, I don't understand your question. Well, it feels Philip, you don't hear anything because others are saying that it's working. Let me know if you can hear the track playing. Tony, it's a different kind of space. I mean, you have space both in the spectrum field and you have space in the dynamic range. So what you do with the compression is to occupy the dynamic range. So if a signal has an attack and then a release, you are actually reducing the difference between attack and release and lifting everything up so that it occupies more dynamic range, less dynamic range, sorry, and it's more audible overall. So if you have a lot of instruments playing together, they usually occupy more dynamic, more space in dynamic meaning. so you don't want the drums to feel everything. But in this case, we don't have almost anything playing. So to make the sound bigger and make the track sound bigger and fuller, you can use the parallel compression to have the drums sound louder. Tony, it depends on the genre you are mixing. For rock music, you actually don't want dynamic range. You want everything to be as loud as possible. You want the sound bigger than live, and you don't really care about dynamic range. If you are working with more acoustic music, you want a higher dynamic range, usually 12, 18 dBs. Well, the parallel compression, carefully listen to the snare and the tails of the cymbals. You are going to hear more of them when I enable. I'll let the track play again. Now it's in bypass. And you can hear that the snare is short in time. It's like a slam. It's very short, and the kick is short, and everything is very defined and controlled. If I enable the parallel compression, you carefully listen to, especially to the snare. Can you hear that? The tail of the snare gets longer, and also the cymbals. Listen here. Everything is more feeling more of the space between one hit and the other. I don't know if I explain myself. There is more glue. That's the right word I was searching for. Okay, this is our drum bass. This is our drum bass, and now we'll go on to mixing the bass track, so we can see the external sidechain in action. So I first enable the plugin back and descend, so I can use my external sidechain for the kick. So if I play the bass track without compression, this is with the internal sidechain, and now I'm going to use it with the external sidechain, so it compresses. Keep in mind that this is randomly made right now. I want to compress it only when it kicks. This is the external sidechain, and the compression is working only when the kicks hits the sidechain. If I change it, sorry, if you lower the threshold or increase the ratio very high, will if you lower the threshold or increase the ratio very high, will the sound? Oh, well, if you lower the threshold, the sound will get compressed more independently of the ratio, because more of the signal will be above the threshold, so it will be compressed more anyway, and the output level will be lower. So if now change from external to internal, well, the ratio, the ratio determines the amount of compression that is being applied below after the signal crosses the threshold. So if the signal is above the threshold, is higher than the threshold, it gets compressed, it gets divided. Simply, it's a simple division by the number specified in the ratio. So if you have a 2-to-1 ratio and the signal is above of 10 dBs, you are going to have the signal reduces by 5 dB. But of course, if you lower the threshold, the amount of signal that is going to be reduced is still more, even if even with the same ratio. If you lower the threshold, it may happen. If you lower the ratio, it may happen that you get less reduction, but it's not guaranteed. Exactly. Everything that goes above the threshold will trigger the compressor, so will lower the volume by the amount specified by the ratio. So if you want to squash everything, to cut everything, just put the ratio to 20. So everything is going to be limited very hard. Well, clippers are fine if you don't mind having some kind of distortion in your tracks, and if you have problems usually with the snare or with some electronic sound that have very short transients that are not catched by compressor, you can limit them or clip them to bring them in control. But keep in mind that Tony, a compressor set to 20 is like a limiter, honestly. Really, it's not much difference. When the transients are so short that the compressor can catch them, a clipper is useful, of course. But keep in mind that when using this kind of compression here, you get the analog models working, and they include a sort of clipper because they does not allow the signal to exceed the digital zero, because they are actually soft clipping it. That's what a transistor, when it's overloaded, does. So in the analog world, you have clippers for free, because when you drive the input signal, you are going to lose the rough edges of the sound. No, Ian, the clipper simply cuts everything. It doesn't lower the level, doesn't do any kind of magic. When you hit the ceiling, the peaks are removed, and you can do that in two ways. A hard clipping, it's a digital thing and usually not very desirable, and you can do that in a more analog way with soft clipping. And it's not like okay, this is linear until here and stop. it's more like a more gentle curve. So levels is reduced a little bit before reaching the limit, and you get more distortion, but a more pleasant sound. What I was doing the best. If I turn off the external sidechain and leave it to the internal, you can hear the difference. Let me compress exactly the same amount. Now the bass is compressed disregarding of what happens in the kick. But since they usually play together, we want them to help each other. So with the external sidechain, I can set the auto again. I don't know if you heard, but the kick is more audible now, because when the kick hits, the bass gets lowered the level. So it really helps us fixing. It's not something to fix, but making the kick stand out. If we don't have particular issues with this bass, but if we wanted to have a more fuller bass sound, we could have used two instances of the compressor. The first one reacting to the bass sound itself and making the bass sound. The other one reacting to the kick, lowering the level when a kick hits, so to give more room to the kick. I can use this other model also on the bass to let you hear the difference. Why auto is not working with this kind of configuration, but with everything FAT, it makes everything bigger. So it's more fuller sound, but I love VCA 160 on this, so I'll stick to this. So since it's a lot we are talking, so I will skip to the vocals. That is the hard part when mixing and getting it right. I have a vocal bus for sake of easiness, let's say. I will just compress the vocal bus and not each track itself. Otherwise, it would take a lot of time. Let's listen to the vocal in solo.
Penso dall'America parte, come Corrado e i fascisti su Marte. Vado nel mondo da salvatori, mischiando le carte. Colonizzatori, sempre più buoni padroni, ma con la faccia ci mettono, avanzano con i droni. Gli echi conquistatori, col fare da cafoni, carri armati mettono onde che poi tu suoni. Questa è la questione delle questioni, non sono supposizioni, ma pallottole che fischiano in tutte le direzioni. Come quando premio muori, come quando solo dietro un ferro spuntano i coglioni.
Okay, here's our vocals. If we bypass them,
Penso dall'America parte, come Corrado e i fascisti su Marte. Vado nel mondo da salvatori, mischiando le carte. Colonizzatori, sempre più buoni padroni, ma con la faccia.
you see, you can listen it carefully. We have some problems here, so we want to tame them with compression, and I want to use the FAT for this reason, with a fast attack and a fast release, because I just want to remove the P's and the T's and all these kind of issue we have on this recording. So I will first set
Penso dall'America parte, come Corrado e i fascisti su Marte. Vadono il mondo da salvatori mischiando le carte. Colonizzatori sempre più buoni padroni. Con la faccia ci mettono, avanzano con i droni, yankee conquistatori. Col fare da cafoni, carri armati mettono onde che poi tu suoni. Questa è la questione delle questioni, non sono supposizioni, ma pallottole che fischiano in tutte le direzioni. Quando premio muori.
Then we want to remove everything, but not that drastically, because otherwise we're going to alter too much the sound of the voice. So 5 dBs may be fine.
Come Corrado e i fascisti su Marte. Vadono il mondo da salvatori mischiando le carte.
Usually the ratio used for vocals, so leave it alone.
Ci mettono, avanzano con i droni, yankee conquistatori. Col fare da cafoni, carri armati mettono onde che poi tu suoni. Questa è la questione delle questioni, non sono supposizioni, ma pallottole che fischiano in tutte le direzioni. Come quando premio muori, come quando solo dietro un ferro spuntano i coglioni, si sa.
Okay, so you can see from the short spikes in the yellow graph here, we remove those short sounds that were causing problems, and we gain a bit of body. Now we can use another instance of Multicomp Plus MK2 and use another model, the Opto, that works very often together with the FET, with the FAT on vocals, to bring out the body.
Penso dall'America parte, come Corrado e i fascisti su Marte. Vadono il mondo da salvatori mischiando le carte. Colonizzatori sempre più buoni padroni, ma con la faccia ci mettono, avanzano con i droni, yankee conquistatori. Col fare da cafoni, carri armati mettono onde che poi tu suoni. Questa è la questione delle questioni, non sono supposizioni, ma pallottole che fischiano in tutte le direzioni. Come quando premio muori, come quando solo dietro un ferro spuntano i coglioni, si sa. 118 non ti salverà.
As you can see, the auto input gave back our 5 dBs that we lost in the previous stage of compression, and getting our negative 6 dB of compression on this vocal bring out the whole body of the vocals. So let me turn on oversampling. So,
penso dall'America parte, come Corrado e i fascisti su Marte. Vadono il mondo da salvatori mischiando le carte. Colonizzatori sempre più buoni padroni, ma con la faccia ci mettono, avanzano con i droni, yankee conquistatori. Col fare da cafoni, carri armati mettono onde che poi tu suoni. Questa è la questione delle questioni, non sono supposizioni, ma pallottole che fischiano in tutte le direzioni. Come quando premio muori, come quando solo dietro un ferro spuntano i coglioni, si sa. 118 non ti salverà. Ricorda Nagasaki ed Hiroshima. La storia parla chiaro, gli unici a sganciare la bomba Una generazione senza nome, addormentato dentro il sogno di un massone, in uno stato che non ha solo un padrone, la disperazione produce assassini.
Can you see how we are having a little bit fuller sound of the vocals and a more stable kind of sound? With the fastest compressor, with the faster compressor, we changed the peaks in the vocals with the S, the P's, the T's, and with the slower one, we got our body out of that. So we have something that is going to sit fine in the mix once we enable the guitars that we are going to do now. And if I enable everything at this point,
Penso dall'America parte, come Corrado e i fascisti su Marte. Vadono il mondo da salvatori mischiando le carte. Colonizzatori.
Okay, what's happening here?
Come Corrado e i fascisti su Marte. Vadono il mondo da salvatori mischiando le carte. Colonizzatori sempre più buoni padroni, ma con la faccia ci mettono, avanzano con i droni, yankee conquistatori. Col fare da cafoni, carri armati mettono onde che poi tu suoni. Questa è la questione delle questioni, non sono supposizioni, ma pallottole che fischiano in tutte le direzioni.
Okay, we have some routing issue. I don't know what's happening, but let's pretend that everything works fine.
La storia parla chiaro, gli unici a sganciare la bomba Una generazione senza nome, addormentato dentro il sogno di un massone, in uno stato che non ha solo un padrone, la disperazione produce assassini.
For me, the vocals are squashed the right amount. I mean, in total at around 10-12 dB of gain reduction, because the vocal is very dynamic. So I don't want the first part of the words that I usually shout. I don't want them to be that louder than the rest of the words. So I compress everything and I have a constant flow of sound that I can put inside my my mix. So usually I also compress a little bit of guitars with an opto compressor, very slow one, and I do just 2-3 dBs of compression guitar. They play.
Sotto all'immagine di Cristo, professare false parole, chiesa all'anticristo, Mefisto, io per l'inferno voglio il visto. Una generazione senza nome, legato dentro il sogno di un massone, lo Stato che non ha solo un padrone, la disperazione, però successo fino a ripetizione. Una generazione senza nome, addormentato dentro il sogno di un massone.
A little bit more groove here.
Stato che non ha solo un padrone, la disperazione, però successo fino a ripetizione. Una generazione senza nome, legato dentro il sogno di un massone, lo Stato che non ha solo un padrone, la disperazione, però successo fino a ripetizione. Una generazione senza nome, addormentato dentro il sogno di un massone.
Okay. We have now a very compact and compressed sound, a very in-your-face sound. That is what we were after. Usually, this genre requires that. So, what do you think about it? I think we got a pretty solid mix, even if we did on the fly. And I think that's it. With the Multicomp Plus, you get different flavor of compression. You've seen you can do parallel compression. You have the FAT, the VCA, the different kind of compression that you can use on almost everything. We also have some keyboard parts, but they don't very work fine, so I'm not going to use them. Yes, we are going to put everything on YouTube. So if I enable the keyboards, you can hear.
Sempre più buoni padroni, ma con la faccia ci mettono, avanzano con i droni e chi conquistatori, col fare da cafoni, carri armati mettono onde che poi tu suoni. Questa è la questione delle questioni, non sono supposizioni, ma pallottole che fischiano tutte le direzioni, come quando prendi un muori, come quando sono dietro un ferro spuntano i coglioni, si sa, 118 non ti salverà, ricorda Nagasaki e Hiroshima.
Well, I could compress a little this piano here with the 4K to make it more controlled.
Sempre più buoni padroni, ma con la faccia ci mettono, avanzano con i droni e chi conquistatori, per fare da cafoni, carri armati mettono onde che poi tu suoni. Questa è la questione delle questioni, non sono supposizioni, ma pallottole che fischiano tutte le direzioni, come quando prendi un muori, come quando sono dietro un ferro spuntano i coglioni, si sa, 118 non ti salverà, ricorda Nagasaki e Hiroshima, la storia parla chiaro, gli unici a scacciare la bomba.
So now, what I did is with this compressor here to control a little bit more of the piano sound and make it more, let's say, constant, reducing the difference between the tails and the peaks. And I did that using the Console 4K because it's a very dry, a very compact sounding compressor. And I didn't want this delay track to go everywhere. So in this way, I've been able to control it easily.
padroni, ma con la faccia ci mettono, avanzano con i droni e chi conquistatori, col fare da cafoni, carri armati mettono onde che poi tu suoni. Questa è la questione delle questioni, non sono supposizioni, ma pallottole che fischiano tutte le direzioni, come quando premi un muori.
So this was it. I see everybody has something to do and I have to eat too. So I hope I gave you an idea on how to use these plugins. If they were helpful enough, let me know if you have more questions. If you want to see other plugins in action, just let me know, and we will find a way to explain those two. So thank you very much for taking the part of this webinar. And as I told you, you will be able to see it on YouTube. So if you lost something, you will have 2 hours of videos to watch. So be sure to take a break sometime. So thank you very much for being here.